All right, can everybody see my screen? Awesome. Okay, this being module 2, what we're going to talk about, and I'm going to try to keep it really down to earth, is just making sure that we all understand that data doesn't just happen. Understanding it doesn't just occur. This is honestly, one of the most confusing things in our world today is oftentimes data. It has risen in its importance. I often tell my colleagues across the United States and beyond when I meet with them and do workshops, presentations, that sort of thing. We have 3 major assets in our world, in my world, specifically in higher education. Anybody want to guess what those 3 major assets are? Let's just say higher ed specifically. What are the 3 main assets? Resources, that sort of thing.
Is it an alliterative list? Do they all start with D?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It depends
Never
on
mind
what
then.
language we're speaking, but I would love to hear your ideas though.
Oh no, I just, it would seem like higher ed to come up with something to be like data, dialogue, and donuts or something.
Hey, look, never go to a meeting without donuts, Scarlett. So, close. You said 1. What was the one that you said? Which one do y'all think was the one of the 3 that she said?
Data.
Data, right? It's actually the one that most people don't think about when they think about what's of value to an organization, right? But data is probably the most prominent and used day to day that people overlook most. What are the other 2? I'm looking at about 10 of them right here.
Students.
Let's call them humans. How about that? Human resources, right? Human resources. Without faculty, staff, and students, do we have organizations or institutions of higher learning? What's the last? What's the 3rd?
Money.
This is a tricky one, Jody. And I'm only telling you that because you're Jody. I wouldn't push back on anybody else. No, I'm joking. I would. It's tricky, right? So money is money, but money isn't really a resource unless you use it, right? Make sense? So what's something that we all use? And I mean, like, think pre-COVID. Where did we go to learn?
Do you mean actual facilities?
Facilities, yeah. Resource, computers, desks, all that kind of stuff, right? Our physical resources. So physical resources, human resources, data resources, right? Those are the 3 main assets of most organizations in the world right now. And it's often something that people have to discover on their own. If you ask any CEO, what are the most important pieces of your work? They're like, my people and my products, right? It's more than that, right? It's also the information itself and how we use it and manage it. So that's really kind of reframing our mindsets about what's important, really. It's really thinking more philosophically about what's important to us. And so we're going to talk about really just challenges with communication in general. And then we're going to think about communicating data. And then we're going to end by just going back to the basics and thinking about at the very basic level, we have to really understand our variables, right? Because you're going to be expected to kind of have to know this entire spectrum of data communication, and you don't do that well if you don't know your variables, right? Make sense? Okay. All right, so remember last week I showed you this beautiful slide that I built. I think it looks better in the book. Has anybody read the book yet? What does this look like in the book? Yeah, like a book, like a set of books just tipping over, right? I didn't want to introduce chaos into your world by making you think that this process was going to end with something falling. So I decided to go just top down. So remember, the purpose of this course is to flow through this process of manipulating data to gain information and create insights that then helps us tell a better data story, helps people make decisions that take action for change, and people then find value in the entire process, right? If I could summarize this course in one sentence, I just did, right? So I think a good practice for all of you over the next several weeks is to be able to look at this chart and say something similar, right? If someone says, hey, what are you doing in that class that you're taking at Agnes Scott College? This is your answer, right? If someone in the job market is interviewing you and saying, what was the most influential course and instructor during your time at Agnes Scott College? I'm just joking, but this is your answer, right? And I find that honestly, communicating, this is a good premise for communication in general, but isn't that nice to just do simple blocks and flow them into one singular sentence to help convey an entire course, an entire 16 weeks of learning was summarized by just hitting like 6 different or 7 different words, right? So I'm not saying you need to be able to do that now, but again, just a reminder of what we're doing. We're going to come back to this slide pretty much every week, and just a heads up, we are here. Okay. How many of you think you're somewhere else in your skills? Don't be afraid to brag. It's okay. I do it all the time.
I feel like Jody and I ought to be. Sorry, Jody, I'm bringing you.
Oh, speak for yourself, ma'am.
Just based on the tail end of analysis, because you made us go through this process to communicate the results of the analyses that we did. We walked through the process of telling a data story. I wouldn't say that I feel, top level, but I feel like we've at least got some familiarity with the concepts because you gave them to us last semester.
Okay, just give everybody a heads up of what course that was, so they know when they get into it that they might.
Oh, that was data analysis 2. We had to do a little bit in data analysis 1 too, honestly.
Yeah, that was a group project though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this is interwoven within your courses. This is a data communication program, right? This is a big part of that program. And so this should be one of those things that touches all classes should have some sort of communication, some sort of data element. We're going to get all the way through this semester, and I'm not going to do it by purely lecturing. Really, I'm going to expect you all to chime in. So let's do that now, right? Let's go ahead and get on it. As module 2, it's just a kind of a refresher in case you haven't seen the learn section yet. Module 2, we're really going to start with this idea of COVID. Have you ever heard of this thing called COVID, right? Yeah, it's a thing. It's a really big thing, and it's a big thing in the world of data communication. And I'll explain why if you haven't read the article yet, because it really did show us that we're not prepared to use data to inform decision making at a mass scale, right? We're going to talk about different processes, data collection, data prep, data analysis, and how all of that flows into this process of communicating data. We're also going to think about our own personal information as being integral to our data stories and our data storytelling. And then we're going to talk about thinking about population data, personal data. How do we interweave them into telling a more appropriate data story? So, all right, so let's first hear from all of you. Time for me to mute and thus listen to you. I want to hear your own challenges with communication. Please feel free to open up and discuss. What challenges do you face in communication, more broadly, not necessarily data communication, but have you found that that you experience challenges in your work, in your school, anywhere that like that? And then we'll focus it more on data after everyone's had a chance to chime in. Feel free to unmute when you're ready.
I'll go. Surprise. So I work at a medical college in the Office of Admission. So I would say one of my challenges is sending out to meet the expectations of our leadership team that we can send out beautifully written, concise emails that a prospective student will open the very first email and be like, oh my gosh, I have to go to this school, without them thinking there's, 49 other colleges out there that are sending very similar messages with the same hope. So I think it's just the challenge is not just the message itself, but the delivery method, and then meeting the expectations of people who are not in it every day and who don't really want to realize there's a lot of competition out there.
And students don't open email.
And there is also that, but
I mean,
I don't like to think that. Thank you.
No, I'm joking, Jody. Thank you. No, that's interesting. So written email, written communication, as the main vein for communicating admissions decisions and all that kind of stuff. But is your audience really paying attention? Maybe, maybe not. Good example. Who else?
Yeah, I have since high school and then on my undergrad, especially in classes of history, geography, and political science with data, it just seems like, no offense to my fellow Americans, but it seems like y'all think y'all know everything, and because of the superpower, let's say the superpower, but there's so much information out there that I had to bring in, and I'm glad the teacher allowed me to kind of explain, that there's no just like this one race. There are many ethnicities, many culture. There's different data. And I read in the COVID article, I was surprised, but not really surprised of how the misconception about a certain group. So.
Yeah, so you bring up a really good point about history in general, and I always make this critique about history textbooks. You can go look at 5 different history textbooks and walk away with different interpretations of certain events, right? I'm from Mississippi, y'all. My Mississippi Studies textbook glossed over the Civil Rights Movement, glossed over Civil War, right? In comparison to what was really there. I didn't know who Emmett Till was until I visited his the bridge that he was essentially thrown over, and that's really terrible. So growing up, I got a miseducation, right? I've done my best to correct that, of course, now. But Simon, thank you for that very honest and open response. I appreciate that. What else? What else in terms of communication do y'all struggle with?
Being concise can be difficult, especially when you're really passionate about something or there's a lot to communicate. How to do that in as few words as possible can be challenging sometimes.
Sorry if you haven't realized it yet. As soon as I'm listening, but as soon as I turn and start to muddle around with stuff, that means I'm picking up that article on first gen students, right? Scarlett, from last week. That was like, where is that article? I'm about to show you something, Ty, that relates back to what you just said very well. So here we go. Y'all see this? Can you see it? It's less than a page. I promise there's nothing below it. So it's less than a page. I've been working on proposing a series of recommendations for one area of our university system to consolidate operations for cost savings and to benefit students and all that stuff. Less than a page, right? You want to know what I got initially from the director of this area, the director of this area? Are you ready? This is page 1. Hold on. This is page 2. And when I spoke to my boss, he said, let's figure out how to present this out to the constituents a little bit better. So this is something, I promise you, it's not just don't ever feel like you're the only one, but this is just something that is really a struggle for most people, especially when they're an expert at something, right? Good example. Good example. Any others?
Just kind of marrying what Ty said and what Cybus said. When we're trying to reach constituents about political issues, and constituent is a really broad term, right? You're only bound by the fact that you live in the same district. When you're trying to communicate something, it always seems like there's a struggle to meet your audience where they are first of all, how do you establish where your audience is when it's so broad? But if you're trying to communicate about why there should be mandatory paid maternal leave, do people understand that globally this is a more common thing that you would think? It's very possible, it's very easy. Do you take that for granted when you're trying to message, people about it? So wanting to grab attention while also being sensitive to your audience and your constituents is hard, and you inevitably feel like you leave important things out, or you assume too much about what they might know.
Good, Scarlett. I'm going to show you an example of that in a little bit. So good segue for later. It's a good idea. Oh, I'm sorry, Lee. The question was, what challenges do you have in communicating? Just general, work, school, whatever it may be. Not necessarily data, but just, what do you feel like is areas for improvement, right? We've gotten writing concise emails, being effective and communicating in one method that the recipients may or may not even engage with, right? And not knowing any of that on the front end. We also got, just thinking about being concise, right? We got the communication of basically like the communication about assumptions about different areas, cultures, that sort of thing, and being presumptive about what ethnicities we might have, right, in other areas and regions. And then Scarlett just mentioned, just understanding your constituent groups, but also trying to grab their attention outside of, essentially delivering the same message the same way every time won't necessarily get you the results that you hope to see. And lots of examples were shared. So Lee, I hope you heard a few of those good ones. Anybody want to jump in? You're welcome.
I'll add a little bit in.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's difficult with communication. Sometimes it's just trying to find the right rhetoric to speak, because I know like where I work, we have a lot of different ethnicities, and like I'm part of the community center, so I have a lot of them, the refugees come in and they're wanting to get more involved, and I'm trying to describe our different programs that we have open, and sometimes have to like use a different word choice when I'm trying to describe it to them.
That's interesting. Yeah. So just having a cultural understanding of the groups that you serve, right? Being knowledgeable in the front. Do you mind, Nick, if I push back just a little bit and ask, like, did you receive any training on the different types of refugee groups that were coming in? Was there any kind of conversation about that?
Not at all. I just like I work over by like the library, so I'll see them come in and I'll have to like see them and then try to like research the area to sort of get an idea of like how I should speak or different things like that.
For sure. Good example. Anybody else? So what you're seeing on your screen, does anybody recognize this photo? Anything about it look familiar, by the way? What?
A lot of conferences look like that.
Oh, yeah, they do. What would you say about the let's start with the presenter. How would you describe the presenter?
He's fighting for their attention, probably.
Who is the presenter?
Is it you?
It is, yeah. I saw this on a website after I did this workshop, and goodness gracious, how many people are looking at the presenter? I wouldn't say zero, Lee. I would say at least one. I think
I think the guy to the right of her is looking.
Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, we don't know, but yes, maybe. Yes. I know a lot of people that do this lean and they've got their phones like right below the screen, right? It's like right there, right? Maybe he's doing that. I don't know. Yeah, but in general, I mean, you get a bunch of people in the room and you give them a place to plug in their laptop or their phone, and this is actually a workshop that had nothing to do with anything that's on these people's screens. I know exactly what I was presenting. I was presenting a workshop at a national meeting on projecting tuition revenue, like saying, okay, you know we discount about this rate, right? You get that fellowship, you got the scholarship. How much actual tuition revenue should we expect to receive? Because we've got to pay our faculty and our staff. Neither of the things that you see front and center here are part of that conversation. And of course, I laughed about it when I got home, but I was like, what was I saying at this point that made folks check out, right? And so one of the things that I think that goes without saying, and we've heard it kind of touched on today, is knowing your audience, right? Knowing your audience. And sometimes we have the opportunity to know our audience ahead of time, and sometimes we don't. You know what? Going back to Jody's initial example, I'm honestly surprised that we still send emails to students about communicating admissions process. I got to tell you, I would have, I don't know, maybe we should just do a TikTok dance and say you're in or something. I don't know what that. I don't TikTok, so I don't know if that's a thing or not. But when we think about all the different challenges that come with communication, you've all given me some great examples tonight. One of my biggest challenges in communication specifically is knowing my audience, but also bringing people together and bringing everyone together on whatever journey I'm trying to take them on. That was one of the things I realized from this photo was that workshop. It was packed room. I mean, look at that, like room full of people, over about 100 people actually. But I remember even being in the front of the room thinking none of these folks are really paying attention. They're here because we're in San Diego, right? They're not really here to learn about tuition revenue projections. So let's then talk about data communication challenges. All of you in this program have an interest in either data, logistics, management, right? Social entrepreneurship, innovation, that sort of thing. And data is very integral. What sort of challenges are you facing when it comes to communicating data?
It's like, I know for my job, the issue that we have with communicating data is people try to use data to match their beliefs and their systems of thinking, as opposed to like actually looking at what the data is actually saying.
They try to find what fits, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or they make it fit. It's kind of like the square peg round hole approach. Interesting. So give us an example, Adria, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so one of the things was a lot of our students at a certain campus will transfer out to go to a more well-known school. So I work at North Georgia, and the students will transfer out to go to UGA. Sorry. And then so the data was saying like, oh, this many students are going to UGA, but it was more so like when it was presented, it was like, oh, you're losing this many students, or your retention rate looks like this. And so people were like, well, no, how do we craft that in order to make it seem like we're not losing students? And so, yeah, what is being published is not actually what the data was talking about.
Interesting. So in that case, was it trying to get everybody on the same page with regards to the problem, or not necessarily? I don't know if it's a problem. Is it a problem? Let's actually start there. Is it a problem?
It's a 2-year commuter campus. It's not a problem. They're supposed to transfer. The problem is that they're transferring out of the institution as a whole.
I see. So do more students come in after going somewhere else, or do they come in and then leave to go somewhere else?
They come in and then they leave to go somewhere else.
Okay, gotcha. I can see that can be very difficult to understand because it goes against our understanding of college and the steps that students take, right? And the pathways that they take, right? I don't know very many high school students that say, I want to go somewhere for only 2 years and it be a university, right? Scarlett, you want to chime in?
When I was serving seniors last year, UNG was one of the schools that if a student didn't get into their reach school, which might have been UGA, then UNG was a school that they would go to in their mind, already knowing as soon as they hit those 30 credit hours, they were going to transfer. And it sucks for the UNG reps and people like that, because it doesn't look sexy to have a low graduation rate because people transfer out of where you go. But at the same time, those institutions are vital because the student is really hell bent on being a Georgia Bulldog. UNG helps them get there eventually. But I imagine for you guys, it, doesn't look cute, but students rely on schools that serve that exact purpose.
Interesting. That's great. That's a great example. And it does, I mean, definitely hits home for me, right? Being in higher education, but how much work could we do to reframe that process of what really do we mean by student success at UNG, right? Student success is not necessarily someone who stays and graduates, although that is a success, but also someone who's able to go on and succeed, right? Well, I like that example a lot. I think it's definitely a problem more broadly than just UNG. You can probably find that a lot of institutions struggle with the similar concept. Any other data examples, non-higher ed? Sorry, Jody. Any other data communication issue? Yeah, go ahead, Ty.
Sometimes it's with reading charts and graphs. Like when my mom, to disclose, is a type 2 diabetic. So sometimes when we get like test results and labs from her, there'll be these like fancy charts that show A1C versus blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what does this mean? Like, I can understand this maybe in the context of if I were looking in a history textbook and can understand like that graph or certain types of graphs, but like certain types of displays can be challenging to wrap your mind around because there's just so much on that chart at one time.
Right. And please never put anything in the 3D bar chart or pie chart or exploding pie chart or bar chart, especially medical.
I'd be scared.
Yeah, it's a little difficult. That's good. Yeah, so when we have important, I mean, not to say again that students transferring out is not important, but really important like health data. Gosh, if that's confusing to understand and difficult to communicate, what does that say for our ability to act on it? And I think that's one of the main takeaways of our TED Talk this week. Did anybody take that away from the TED Talk when you watched it? Yeah. Sabi, are you raising your hand to speak? Go
Yes,
ahead.
I did.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. If I had to write this down because I don't know if I heard this word, efficacy.
Efficacy.
Yeah. Basically, what I get from it is like, instead of telling people, hey, you should change your behavior, do this because this is the right thing to do for your health, maybe you understand their situation. He used something about brushing teeth and stuff, and maybe you don't know. Maybe these people don't have a toothbrush. Maybe they don't have. This is what I'm thinking. Like, because it goes back to COVID and the data and the misconception and not looking at the environment where these people live, what they have. Do they have access to healthcare? Do they have access to go to a CVS to get the toothpaste? And simple as a toothpaste and toothbrush, you never know what people are going through. So I feel like instead of just as a professional saying, oh, these people are not listening to me, they're not brushing their teeth, look at the whole thing, efficacy.
Yeah.
Feel them or put yourself in their shoes. I don't know. That's what I got.
Hey, speaking again of knowing your audience, right? If I was that dentist or the guy that I think he's from public health is his background, but if I was talking about dentists to a subpopulation of folks who did not have ready access to dental hygiene, right? That's a whole different conversation, right? How do we frame that conversation? Maybe that should be an exercise for this class. Is a counterfactual, right? If he was trying to convince people who don't have access to regular dental hygiene products to brush their teeth or floss, right? That conversation changes immediately. Yeah. Any other challenges of communicating data that you want to talk about?
I think the challenge that I've run into the most is really knowing how to talk to my demographic. For you, those who don't know, I do diabetes education outside of my job in school. And with that, I present research and data to cluster nurses, teachers, parents, and the students, but I work with middle and high school age students. So high school students, when they see certain graphs, I mean, once I break it down to them, they'll understand it. But like when I'm speaking to my middle school crowd, it's, really supposed to present data to be able for like a fourth grader to understand. But sometimes like they're just looking at me like, what the hell is she talking about? Like, I'm just here for the incentive. So being able to really grasp your audience and be able to keep them like fully aware of like what's going on. I've been able to like put in like different like pop-up quizzes within the PowerPoints for these students to kind of keep them like on track with what I'm talking about. But I've still run into problems with my middle school audience where they're just not grasping it at all.
Right. It's good, Lee. Have you ever heard of the term positionality?
No, sir, I haven't.
Has anybody? I'm trying to look.
What is it again? Positionality?
Positionality. It's more of a statement of positionality. But Lee, it can be effective when you walk into a room of people who are very much not you, right? Like fourth graders, right? To just ground them in your own experiences. I got recruited to deliver a series of workshops and seminars for a national association starting next week on data literacy, which we'll talk a little bit about in this class as well, with two specific institutions. And one of the things that I was asked to do to prepare for this, because each institution is doing their own project, right? Kind of a capstone project of better understanding data, how to use it, how to make and affect change with it, very much in line with what we're doing in this class. One of the things I was asked to do is, can I provide a positionality statement, which essentially tells people where I'm coming from, and it may actually allow them to understand any of my own implicit bias on the topic, right? I think you all know I'm intensely biased when it comes to data use, right? I live, I breathe, I don't sleep when it comes to this topic. So if you need to know kind of what my position is on this, for example, I will tell you, I've been working in this space for more than a decade and a half, right? So Lee, for your example, right, telling people where you come from, what your experiences are in that space, right? And helping them at least connect with you to some degree, even if they're there just for the incentive, they at least know that you have more of an interest in what you're discussing than just being there to give them that incentive, right? Does that make sense, y'all? You're there for more than just the bearer of the incentive. And so that's something else we're going to work through a little bit here as well. Just wanted to put that out there again on the forefront because I thought it was appropriate based on the example you gave. Kara, I thought you unmuted also. I want to make sure I don't talk over you.
It was kind of similar to what Lee brought up, maybe from a slightly different angle, just that you never know how actually interested your audience might be in what you have to say.
You do not.
And so I think that can sometimes be challenging to know how much room you have to, well, kind of like you said, pull your audience along with you on the journey that you want them to take, versus like cut your losses because you can tell they're not going to stop looking at their spreadsheet. Like that can be a challenge to know that balance.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I see Ty, you want to tell us about what you put in the chat?
Yeah, I watch an obscene amount of YouTube, and one of the YouTube like series that I've come across, I think the channel Wired does these videos where they have an expert, like let's say they're talking about astrophysics and they bring in Neil deGrasse Tyson. They'll have him sit in a chair, and then they'll have another chair across from whoever the professional is. And they'll bring in like a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 16-year-old, someone who's getting their bachelor's degree, and then someone who's getting their PhD, all in that like same subject area. And you get to see someone who is arguably at the top of their field try to break down something as complex as astrophysics or neuroscience or molecular biology to like a 5-year-old. And it's really interesting and sometimes brain breaking, because you're like, how in the world can you tell somebody about, I don't know, the theory of relativity, and they don't even know how to tie their shoes yet? But it's really interesting. It's a cool video to watch.
Cool. Thank you. I'll try to find an example link and include it in the class as well. It's a good idea. All right, so lots of good examples. I'm glad that I've heard from many of you that you struggle with data communication, because this course is intended to help you with that, right? So thanks again for reassuring me that we're all in the right place. Now, take a look again at this photo just for a brief second, and let's talk about this one. Who's that guy? I know I'm full of myself, right? Yeah, this is me. This is a different meeting, not a workshop. What do you notice that's different about this image, other than my hair is a little bit redder? It's not very red now, y'all, just so you know. What do you notice?
Everybody's
Are you
paying
in the U.S.
attention.
Senate? Are you in the U.S. Senate?
Say what?
Are you in the U.S. Senate? Like, because I see American flags, or the UN, United Nations, something like that.
No, I'm
That'd be cool.
I'm speaking for the Delta Regional Authority. I was selected as the keynote speaker for our graduating class for the Delta Leadership Institute, the Delta region being 6 states, about 100 counties. And so a little bit of context, that's a very official stage. But the Delta Regional Authority is one of, I think, 4 regional development authorities within the United States. So there's the Appalachian Regional Commission. It actually is Georgia. That's the Georgia one. Not sure about the Pacific Northwest, Kara, but the Delta was a big development region as well. Anyway, sorry. Yes, I'm there, but I'm not speaking in front of the Senate. Good question, though, Simon. What else? What was someone else speaking? I thought I heard others.
There's no tables and people are actually like looking at you. There's one guy that's taking a photo or a video or something, but mostly people aren't on their phone.
Hey, yeah, they're not. I mean, he's not texting. It looks like he's taking a photo, right? Yeah, thank you. That's an important detail, right? One, the room was structured in a way that it would be difficult for individuals to have their laptops open and working, right? The environment matters in terms of how we communicate, right? They're also, chairs are pretty close. And if this guy, Bill Bartleman, mayor in Tennessee, decided to pull out his phone, pretty sure this guy would be bothered by it. I mean, they are shoulder to shoulder. This is pre-COVID, by the way, I should have said that. No social distancing going on here. But yeah, a lot of people are looking up. A lot of people are looking up. What do you think I was talking about that had everyone so transfixed?
How cute and special they all are.
Not cute. I'm not one to mince words and give compliments very often, but I was telling them how special they all are. Remember, I was the keynote speaker, right? I don't know if you've ever really paid attention to a keynote speech, but what are some of the main tenets of a keynote speech at a graduation, for example?
Something motivational.
Oh, go ahead, Lee. What's
something motivational?
Motivation. What else? I'm going to ruin every keynote you're ever going to go to for graduation. Go ahead, Jody.
I was going to say, at a prior job, not higher education, I used to help with our meetings department when they would talk to the keynote speaker to tell them what our members wanted to hear. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the keynote speaker is talking about. Our members just wanted to hear how special they were and how important their work was to the saving the universe.
Okay. So like Scarlett and Lee mentioned, right? Special, motivational. What else?
Some relatability going on. They always tell us so you relate.
Something to relate to them with, right? Right? Something that they can connect to, right, Lou? Yeah. What else? So something to connect to the audience, motivate. And what's a third thing? Not the third thing, but what's a third thing that you normally hear at a graduation speech?
Usually some kind of call to action, like go be great, go conquer the world, go use your degree to do blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Okay, good. Call to action. I agree. I hear that a lot too. So let me give you a quick keynote speech. Imagine I'm that guy. Okay. Everybody, I've been where you are. You've made tremendous strides in your own professional and personal development by going through this program at Agnes Scott. I have no doubt in my mind that all of you are going to go out there and succeed. In fact, you're already succeeding now. And I know many of you have job offers lined up, graduate school plans, et cetera, et cetera. Now go out there and succeed, right? Did I hit on all three in like 1 minute? Why does it take them 45?
Is it because you're expected to include some kind of like retrospective? You're expected to be like, in our third quarter, we did this, or we faced this huge challenge and then we did this. Is that what the fluff is?
I think honestly, the fluff is just trying to give the person speaking a little bit bigger ego too. They're trying to make themselves feel special, right? Right. So in the end, they're not communicating data. Do you think I was communicating data during the speech? What do you think? Go
I
ahead.
feel like you definitely tried.
Do you want to find out?
Just a little bit. Maybe you just said, oh, percentage, maybe just a little bit.
There's the transcript. I'm not going to read it all, but I decided to do something different. I don't know if I'll ever be asked to do a keynote speech or a graduation speech. So I said, they asked me to do it. So I wrapped it. Or poem, whatever you want to call it. Not a single piece of data here. But y'all are welcome to check it out. I'll put the link in the chat if you want to read it. It's nothing special, but sometimes it's knowing your audience. And what about my audience did I know? I'll tell you what I knew about them. A lot. I knew a lot about these people. We had gone through about 2 years. We would all, or about half of us would go to Harvard Kennedy School of Government in about a year from now, from that point, to continue this education. So we didn't know each other. I serve on the regional advisory board with Trish Ersfeld now. Tom Harness got elected city councilman for his city in Illinois. And if you want to know how circles connect, he asked me to help him understand his constituents for that election. So he's from Williamson County, Illinois. So anyway, long story short, knowing your audience, oops, there it is, really is important, right? I knew they didn't want data. And I expected all of you to do this whenever I said that, but you know what? Sometimes incorporating even a little bit of data results in this, right? So how do we communicate data effectively without that kind of reaction and to keep an audience on their toes? Well, we do it at the right moment and at the right frequency, right? Jody and Kara, you were in my class, as you've reminded me, so I get to call on you again. How often did I tell you to talk about data when you presented your final presentation? How much data was in that 30-minute speech that you gave?
There were, if we follow the story arc, there were 2 spots to introduce data amongst, was it 5 different components? And there were 2 where we were allowed to sort of nestle some data in, but the vast majority of it was storytelling.
That's right, 2 times, right? We can do a lot with just a little, right? If you've seen a good TED Talk, you've probably seen it in action, right? Which, by the way, feel free to put your own favorite TED Talk in an upcoming Connect thread that I'm going to have you do, because I think it's important for us to start looking at those and to get the feel and the vibe and the tempo. So one of the important things, now moving away from pictures of me, right? One of the important things to think about as we really try to communicate data is, again, where were we in this process? We're just at data, right? We're not beyond that yet. So let's first understand that there is a loop and a process that has to happen in order for us to make meaningful information come out of data, right? First, we have to be able to understand a good, solid data collection process, right? That can be surveys, that can be public data sets, that can be interviews, that can be focus groups, right? Qualitative, quantitative data, tons of different ways of doing it. And then once we go through that step, we might be ready to actually get that information ready to analyze, right? Or during that process, we might realize that we didn't collect the data in the right way, or maybe we should have involved different stakeholders. Maybe we should have involved additional resources. All that to say that even though I've kind of put it out there as data collection, data preparation, analysis, like it's boom, 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 y'all, it's not. It's iterative. You might get to the analysis phase and say, oh crap, I got to go back and kind of rethink some things because I didn't collect my data in the right way. Maybe I used categories instead of continuous variables for incomes, that sort of thing. And so again, once we work through this, it really is a loop, right? It continues to inform itself. Now, getting data in our hands and ready to use is this process, but integrating that process into this very first piece that was described in this week's lesson, in this week's Learn segment, right? Remember this feedback loop that he said, in order for us to make meaning of information for healthcare data, that sort of thing, COVID data, whatever it may be, we first have to try to make it personalized, right? We need to make it relevant to the individuals. If we want them to floss more, we have to meet them where they are, right? They may not even have floss, right? And then what we need to do is discuss with them the benefits in a way that's meaningful directly for that individual. Now, we often don't have the luxury of letting me, I don't have the luxury of teaching all of you one-on-one, do I? What if I did? Do you think we'd be having a different conversation right now? You bet. I mean, I would hope you would say, I hope so, right? Just because everyone in this class has a different learning style, probably. Everyone in this class reacts and reflects differently. Now, we have to balance the need for personalized data versus the value of population data to really come out of this week, so to speak, with the knowledge and understanding that this isn't an easy process, right? Creating a data feedback loop is great, and it is the ideal, right, to have that personalized data for individuals. But oftentimes we're working with groups, we're working with classes, we're working with students, refugees, that sort of thing. And we've really got to make strides to both connect and allow them to act based on everything else that happens in the middle, right? So all that to say, I'm going to get out of here and come into our topic of the day, right? Let's think then, what did we learn from COVID data dashboards. Has anyone ever seen a COVID dashboard? Lee, everybody, maybe? No? Who hasn't seen a COVID dashboard? Okay, good. Everybody has. Did anybody look at mine in the Lanyap, by the way, for this week? What'd you think? And be brutal. I told you be brutal. This isn't a be nice because I'm Eric moment.
I mean, I just glanced at it,
Yeah, go ahead.
Ben was like, oh, nope, I wouldn't have to narrow things down if I wanted to really look at this. I didn't play around with it. I was just like, I just literally opened it and was like,
Nope. Bye. See you. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Dia. Anybody else? Saiba.
I'm looking between like the southern states and like the region. And I don't know if I'm wrong or right, but looks like the southern states have more death rate than maybe the north.
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at this wrong.
Well,
Mhm.
this is just
Because Texas, Alabama, you see, Florida,
yeah.
Georgia, they're like in the 2000-ish. And then you go up, it's like in the 1000 kind of.
Oh, you mean the cases per 10,000?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I was like,
Yes.
deaths. I was like, oh, it's way more than 2,000 deaths. But yeah. So the cases per 10,000, right? It's well, again, remember in the article that you're going to read this week, you're going to hear about the use of logs, right, to standardize data. This is one way of talking about different sizes of populations on the same scale, right? So out of every 10,000 people that live in Georgia, right, how many cases of COVID were contracted at this point? I think it was, I got tired of thinking about COVID in February of 2021. So yeah, I got pulled off onto other projects, but all that to say, right, when you think about it on a per 10,000, it standardizes it. So notice I still kept, I don't know if anybody clicked this button, but that's a button, by the way. Just total cases, right? This would make you not want to go to Texas or Georgia, or not Georgia, sorry, Texas or Florida or California, right? And so many people saw things like this. Did anybody see something like this when you were thinking about COVID?
I was intrigued when I looked at yours because most of the other dashboards I had seen always did it by 100K. So I thought it was was that a choice that you made to be more, because it's difficult for people to conceptualize what 100,000 people is, but you can sort of conceptualize what 10,000 people means.
You actually hit the nail right there on the head, and I'm glad you picked up on that. But yeah, I thought to myself, we only have really 2 cities in Arkansas that have more than 100,000 people.
Mhm.
Where I am right now, we have 200,000, and then Bentonville, which is a little bit way northwest up here. They've got, that's where Walmart, JB Hunt, Tyson Foods, or all of those corporations are based. They've got more than 100,000. That's it. It's meaningless to say how many people in Jackson County. Again, I brought in the census county designation. I don't know if you noticed that, but how many in this rural area, right, of maybe 30,000 people got COVID, right? Yeah, that's why I did 10,000, because for me, I was concerned, and you don't know this at all. I just asked you to look at it. Maybe Karen, Jody know, because y'all were in that first class where I did the guest speaking before I became faculty. Jody, Kara? No, not Kara, Jody. Yeah. Jody, I kind of talked through this one a little bit more, and I was concerned at that point with whether or not rural populations, even though they're less dense population wise, because they are rural and have less access to healthcare on a per capita basis, would we see a higher death rate in counties that were considered rural versus counties that were considered urban, that sort of thing. So yeah, I made the decision to do it per town.
Yeah. I
Makes
think,
sense.
I mean, where my parents live is definitely a rural Georgia county, and my mom works for the hospital. And I feel like, and just having experienced people's responses to COVID there versus in Atlanta, I don't know if conceptualizing it based on per 100,000 was like helpful for many people's understanding who live in a small town of, fewer than 10,000.
Yeah. So what county was that, Scarlett, if you don't mind?
Peach County.
Not sure. There it is. So yeah, it had about 2,000 per 10,000, right? So a little higher than, well, double that of Fulton County.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, so let's then can we talk about Georgia for a little bit longer, y'all? Has anyone gone out and looked at the COVID-19 status report for the state of Georgia? I did not put this under lanyard, but I will.
I haven't looked at it recently, and I think that's because I read from someone else that the way that they're choosing to report or what they're choosing to measure is not a great way to actually understand how much COVID is circulating.
Okay, interesting. I haven't read that. What I did do was I took a 5-minute glance, like most people do on websites, and I got here. And I said, okay, over 2 million confirmed cases, 32,000 confirmed deaths, 6,000 probable deaths, right? That's something that I think, Scarlett, that's a good point you've made. There's different ways of counting things, right? And then very small font, I was kind of having a tough time understanding what this really meant without clicking on the link. But I don't know if has anybody really scrolled further? This can also be considered a primer in data visualization types. We've got our map, we've got our histogram, we've got our table, got our side-by-side bar charts that have very small numbers next to them. We've got line charts, we've got stacked bar charts, we've got donut shapes, we've got more stacked bar charts, we've got more tables. Y'all, it is a conglomeration of information. When we think about data communication, I don't think this website would ever make a TED Talk. And I'm sorry if anybody works here. I don't know what are we really trying to take away other than this one red number, right? That seems to be the one thing that jumps out at you. So when we think about communicating data effectively and data visualizations and the use of them, sometimes less is more, right? What do you have there, Scarlett? Do you mind if I click that?
Yeah, you can. I was just going to put in the chat, it's something that you could maybe compare and contrast if you wanted to. I don't know if this is better or worse, but maybe you would know.
No, I don't judge. I just got a little overwhelmed.
You could assess, I guess.
Yeah. So look at this, right? This is the variant, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
Would I know that if I didn't know what a variant meant?
Probably not.
I would think it's probably a college degree, right? A BA. Yeah. My second degree, first degree, 12. I don't know. I'm just joking about that. Yeah, there are plenty of ways that we have seen COVID data be communicated. Does anybody have a favorite, by the way? Don't say mine.
I just like the one with colors. I'm good like when it's like color coded by region or by ethnicity. It makes me understand like the demographic, you know.
Oh, and speaking of ethnicity, I think the article referenced, I think only 26 states at the time that they started to really assess it were collecting it by race and ethnicity, y'all. I mean, that's a big gap, especially when there's assumptions being made, right, about different COVID levels for different race ethnicities and that sort of thing. And I saw that. I do remember watching the news when they came out and said more and more states are doing that. But yeah, there's.
Do you think?
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you think because of its policy that they pushed, because it was 26, I saw in the article, then it was 40 states. Do you think it was policy, or was it people were demanding more information? Because some way or another, the government had to, but come in and and make states and governors release data, especially about mask mandate. After that was mask mandate. I think policy had to do with it. I mean, that's just my opinion.
So let's talk about states' rights. This is going to turn into a political science class real quick. And the limitations of the federal government when it comes to a global pandemic, right? This is why I said earlier, this was a big eye opener. I'm not saying the CDC did a bad job. I'm not critiquing any state, federal entity. What I do want to tell you is that there was no one size fits all for how people measured, communicated, utilized data and information on a daily basis. The one thing that seemed to be consistent, at least during the onset and the height of the initial wave, was that almost every state's governor was having a press conference every day. But what they were saying wasn't really too consistent. And I know the folks, well, I don't know, no. I've talked to them via email. The folks at Johns Hopkins, and the folks at the New York Times who were trying to compile this information, they were watching those press briefings, trying to glean information from each one that would be consistent for the nation or for the world. One of the things that I feel like more and more we're going to see happen with regard to public health data, and this again piggybacks on the TED Talk as well, is the fact that we don't do enough user testing with how we communicate information on the front end. Instead, we kind of tell somebody go put together a dashboard, right? And we get this. How many? I gotta tell you, I haven't even referenced the paragraphs, have I? I mean, and will I probably won't read them. But nonetheless, when we think about user testing, this is another area in the data communication process that as we start to moving out of data, move into information, is this information, right? I'm sorry, let me zoom in a little bit more. Is this actually information to people? Is this information, right? Is option B informative versus option C? I don't know. I mean, everybody reads things a little bit different. So you've all hit on this process of the audience being important. But at the same time, we need to be prepared to think about things in different ways. So in that case, then sorry, I realized what time it is. Make sure you go out and you watch, you read all the things about public health data and COVID, and think critically about public data versus personal data. And you've got two different little things in practice. And trust me, these practice and these connects and reflects they're going to come together. But right now I'm trying to make sure everybody can do what we need to do, both to visualize data as well as discuss it. So in practice, I want you to look at the different types of variables, and just as a refresher, make sure you can allocate a specific category for each one, right? Nominal, ordinal, interval ratio, that sort of thing. And then last, make sure that you know how to identify and change different variable types in Tableau, because we want to make sure that we're using data in the right way when we present it. And if something's a number and we're treating it like text, well, it's going to look really odd in a table, right? It's going to look really odd on that chart. So if you have any questions about either of these, just shoot me an email, text, whatever it may be, message on Canvas, and let me know. Again, as a heads up, I will be offsite for the next couple of days, but I will be able to check email and stuff like that after 5. So anybody want to stick around and ask questions or talk more, you're more than welcome to, but I'm going to go ahead and give us a pause on the recording and give you a chance to skip out if you're ready.